I was thinking about how to introduce myself, and so I thought I would start with my video. One of the many years of school I've gone to, I started going to school when I was 2 years old. And I got an administrative credential, and we had to do a video, and it's a very impressive video. Now, what I did was I did the script, and I brought the pictures, and the rest of it is other people. So I was very impressed with this video, and people were saying, "How did you make that?" I don't know. So if you would start it, Harold, we would go ahead.
All right.
There's something you have to do that says play.
Okay.
Yeah, but that's the last, actually, that's the end of it.
Oh, okay.
So you have to.
Do you know which one of these is it?
Of course I
Oh,
know.
yeah.
There it is.
You press that.
Turn it on.
The baby needs started out
One to the left.
ever so innocent.
Okay, you better start that over because they got to figure out what it's all about.
Under control. My hair has ruined my life. The baby me started out ever so innocent and shy. Don't I look sweet and innocent? And that hair is under control. And then as time went along, it changed. And my namesake came out. And it grew longer, and that's my favorite do. Got to wear it down. And then it was always in braids. Forever braided, forever ribboned. Me and the kid, my younger brother Jonathan. But finally, I got to be a big girl and get a haircut. Was I excited? As the hair got shorter, the legs got longer. But then I became a senior in high school and the bubbles were in. But mine always looked like a big nappy helmet, especially after drill team practice on the football field. And then I got a wedding fro and decided to really go ahead and stay nappy and happy on my wedding day. And here we are with the kid, Mama Donna and Shayna, the name of our world famous restaurant. And that's our grandbaby. Don't know what her name is. She just has wild hair too. And that hairy woman, my goodness. What does that mean? Oh my gosh, that hair went wild and I never could control it. But I got back under control. Me and the Beatles. Here comes a flat top, she's got holy rollers at confirmation time. Fedoras are in. They give you an aura of mystery and mystique as we're all, Shayna with all her parents are happy and smiling. But for cotillions, you have to be very serious and dignified. So we have an African wrap that hides the real dew underneath it. And gray is a great color. What does that mean? Oh my gosh, here we are on Grandma's 80th with our gray hair and smiles galore. Strange-haired woman. A miracle happened in 2001 with the new millennium. My hair got straight and darker. But for today, 30 seconds is plenty. In my dream job as an administrator with my real gray do. But who knows what tomorrow will bring here. I don't know, but 30 seconds is enough.
And clearly, I blew that one, so, and then I'll have you show this one. When I came back to town, I left town, that guy in the wedding cake that I married. We left town and I came back to live, I got married at 21 and came back to live at 35, minus that guy. And people would, and I wore my hair, that gray do, the one where I was with my mom and dad and my daughter, that's how I wore my hair for about 20 years or so, 20, 30 years. And people would look at me and say, you look familiar, but I don't know who you are. And I'd say, well, I'm a Maxey. And they go, yeah, but which one? And they couldn't quite figure it out. No, I'm Donna. And he's like, and finally I'd just say, I'm the little one with all the hair. Oh, what happened to your hair? Won't it grow anymore? So I wore it short for so long that people thought, they see me with hair in a picture and they say, I didn't know Donna could grow hair. I thought something had happened to her. So this is the next one. This is the second video that I actually did, and you can tell I did this one. So,
There sounds
Let's go.
to this.
yeah. But it goes really fast. You're going to have to listen really carefully.
I think you have to click on the square picture or something.
Square picture, huh?
Yeah,
Like
in the
in
middle
the
of it.
actual middle of the video.
Yeah.
Yeah, there you go.
Oh. Hey.
Nice, thank you.
Just kidding.
Many of you are probably asking, who in the world is Miss Maxey? What can I expect this year? Well, let me start at the beginning. I was born in Portland, and my daddy, who had been a teacher in Texas, opened a new barbershop when I was 2. I'm the little person in high school. I started in kindergarten education and had voice in Miss Cornett's class. Now it's called Voice in Elliott Elementary School. Just like you, they changed the boundaries in first grade. I had a new school, Elliott, now called Harriet Tubman Middle School. In 4th grade, I was Elliott's Junior Rose Festival princess. I didn't win the coronation for our area, but I had a great time with the coronation night, and I also got to be the Junior Rose parade. Here's me in Highland, my 6th grade year. My parents bought a grocery store and I finished in Highland, now called Martin Luther King Jr. Elementary. Every morning before school, after school, and on the weekends, I worked in the grocery store along with the rest of the family. At Jefferson High School, I was very social and active in student government, including dance team and senior class vice president. Jefferson School of Life. Had to practice before any cheering at the basketball games. After graduation from Pacific University, I taught pre-K through middle school special education, and I worked with high schoolers and adults. Now that you know who I am, what can you expect? Use the golden rule. Treat others like you'd like to be treated. What skills will you develop this year? How can you help enhance the classes in your learning? Remember, always do your personal best. Well, this is me and my family. You know what to expect. I'm eager to get to know you and get started. Here's to a great year. Coming soon, MLK Jr.
As you can tell, I made this video. So I'm really excited to be here. I'd like for us to start by introducing ourselves. Some of you I met beforehand, and I know what your major is, and others of you I didn't get a chance to meet. So do you all know each other?
I think we should introduce ourselves. Yeah.
So go ahead.
I'm Abe, I'm a poli-sci major, I'm a junior as well.
And where are you from?
I'm from Berkeley, California.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, I'll go. I'm Harold McNairn. I'm Director of Student Leadership and Service, originally from Atlanta, Georgia.
I'm Maya. I'm an environmental studies major. I'm a sophomore.
You speak too softly.
Sorry, I'm an environmental studies major. My name's Maya. My name is Anna. I'm a sophomore English major, and I'm from Thousand Oaks, California. My name is Peyton. I'm a sophomore. I'm a political science major, and I'm from Alameda, California.
I'm Victoria Ray, and I'm retired.
And you are from,
Huntington Beach, California.
oh, you're Californians.
Well, I'm Daniela, senior political science major, economics minor, not from California, but from Hillsboro, Oregon.
Okay.
My name is Chris, and I'm a rhetoric and media studies major and a computer science minor. I'm a sophomore from San Diego, California.
I'm Jessica, and I am a junior rhetoric and media studies major, and I am from and religious studies, and I am from Denver. Wait, did I already say that?
I didn't.
No, I'm not. I didn't say that. I'm
No, you're good.
You're good.
I'm from Denver.
I'm Ginger Michalski. I graduated from here in 1983 with the theater and English major. I'm now in alumni parent programs. And I know Donna through Pacific University and by attending these talks.
And where are you from?
Well, I was born in Berkeley, California, but
Housemates?
Alta Bates. But my family moved when I was 10 to Phoenix, Arizona. So most of my childhood that I remember, I was in Phoenix.
And I'm Janet, and I'm a law professor, and I'm from upstate New York,
Okay.
What was your major though?
political science.
So I'm Donna Maxey, and I'm from Portland, Oregon, and I'm retired, or so I thought. I'm retired from teaching. How's that? I always bill myself as a third grade teacher because I get a turn so I can see you a little bit. Because that's part of the thing of being a teacher, is that you got to look everybody in the eyeball, and you got to keep that classroom control. So you can whip around and look at them and give them the look and just keep right on top of you. So it makes you hyperactive. If I wasn't hyper before, I sure became hyper after starting to be a teacher. But I wanted to show you the videos, kind of to show you where I came from. And I brought the picture of this lady. I always get very emotional when I talk about my parents, so I'm going to try and do it and not cry. And if I can do that, then we'll be in great shape. How much time do we have today?
You're good.
Okay, so what time is this over?
What did I say?
7:30.
Yeah.
Okay, listen, I can talk. So anyway, this is my mother, Johnny Maxey, and you saw my dad in some of the pictures. That last picture that had me and my brothers and sisters and my mom. My dad had passed. He passed in 2001. So I brought this picture of my mom because, okay, let's see if I can do this. Because my parents were so amazing. They were born in Texas, and two very different people. My mother's people had oil property and a blackland farm, and my dad was very poor. His grandfather was supposed to be a French sea captain. We think he was just a poor old white French guy. And his grandmother was Creole and from Louisiana. So they got together. They met at Texas College, where she paid with her own money to go to college, and he got a football scholarship. He had come from a very, very poor family, and everybody in town looked down on his family. So he was very ambitious, and he had aspirations. And I told her she was a little hot thing. I said, you know, you ought to be ashamed. She walked in on the campus and saw him and another guy and looked at my dad and told her girlfriend, I'm marrying him. And by October of the following year, they were married. So, and he would always joke around. She was a little fast thing. I tried to get away from her, but she was after me. I'm right, Daddy. Okay, sure. I'm not buying that one, but it sounds good. I mean, we always joked about it because they were a love story, like Frankie and Johnny, and they eloped her sophomore year and got married, and it's kept it hidden that whole first year. But in college, he and maybe she belonged to the NAACP, which at that time was a underground kind of organization, and had anyone known, they would have been kicked out of school. And it was a very political thing, and had white folks known that he belonged to it, it could have had some very rough consequences. So they went to school at Texas College in Tyler, Texas, and decided, mom always said she lived next to a park that she never got to go into because it was for white folks. And she said, I want better for my children. I want my kids to have a chance to enjoy everything that there is. So they made a plan. He finished his senior year and got a double major in business and in education, and he taught for a while. And it's amazing to watch pictures of my father, because my mother was, if you look at pictures of her, she's always like this. And if you look at my father, he's in pictures and he's like this. And as he got older, every year his head came up higher. And I think it had a lot to do with his self-esteem. And it was very interesting. He taught in Texas for a few years. My eldest sister was born there in Texas, and they moved to Oregon, and came during the early 40s. I think they came like early 41, because my other sister was born in 41 here in August, and came for the shipyards. And he worked in the shipyards for a while, and he came up first and then got a place for them to live. They did not live in Vanport because he knew she was not going to go for Vanport. It's like, I didn't even go and look there. They went and so they lived in a house with some other people who turned out to be my sister's in-laws. And so it was a very interesting connection. Portland was a very interesting place at that time. How many of you have heard of Vanport? Okay, and Vanport is out, do you know where the Expo Center is? Out by the race car tracks on the way to Vancouver? That's where Vanport was, and it was called Vanport because it was between Vancouver and Portland. And Henry Kaiser, you know Kaiser Permanente Hospital, Henry Kaiser had shipyards. He had steel mills. And so during the war, they made ships for the war effort. And so all kinds of people came here, and they built temporary housing out at Vanport, but it was built on a floodplain. And it was never meant to be permanent housing, but it was built there, and they had a huge flood. There was a really heavy snowpack in the mountains, and the river flooded, and they were supposed to tell folks. Well, they informed a lot of the white folks, but they didn't inform the people of color. And there were all different ethnic groups that were there in Vanport. There were Latinos, there were Asians, there were blacks, there were whites. You know, they had their segregated sections there, but all kinds of people lived there. And when the floods came, they say that only a few people died, but there are some people. I did a film with the Scanner Foundation, for the Scanner Foundation, interviewing Regina Flowers and some of the other people. If you want to check this out, I would do this if you're interested in the real history of Portland. Check out the Scanner Foundation films. And one guy talked about how his dad had helped to pile dead bodies as they came up into a warehouse. So they never talk about all of the people who died, but there were tons of people that did die. And it's an interesting place. One of the, you just never know where people are coming from and who they turn out to be. A gentleman, and I just went blank on his name, but anyway, he was one of the first black men who was a full ambassador. And he was the first ambassador to South Africa, and he, a black ambassador to South Africa, and he helped to barter the end of apartheid. And I mention him because he came from the South with his family and lived in Vanport and went to Jefferson High School, where I went to school. So you just never know who's going to come out of where and what. My parents were very determined that their children would have a good education and be exposed to everything. That was my mother. My mother and father had a very interesting relationship in that Daddy was a very outgoing, strong, forceful personality, but she was that still magnolia in the background running it. And as he said, I never knew what this woman was thinking. And he never, but she was his rock. She was his rock. And he was everybody else's rock. And they were highly respected in the community. Daddy came after the shipyards, he tried to teach, and they wouldn't hire him. And they wouldn't hire him because they didn't want this young black buck teaching innocent little white girls for fear that he would rape them. You guys are so oversexed that black men cannot resist you. So I hope you will go home tonight and damp down the sexual part of your personalities because it drives black men wild. That was a joke. I like to crack jokes. So anyway, he never got to teach. And so he ended up making his vocation, which was he cut hair in college to raise extra money. And he became a barber, and his barber shop was one of the unusual ones because most barber shops, people sold hot goods and, there's a lot of cursing and, men hanging out and everything. Daddy says, no, this is a family barber shop, and so we're not having that, and we're going to have a certain level of respect. And in coming to the north, they decided they also were going to take advantage of all of the things that were here. They had, being from the south, they had never voted before, so when they came to Oregon, they registered to vote. And Daddy looked around and he goes, Republican, Democrats, they're all the same to me, and let's see who's in control here, and the Republicans were. So he became a Republican and was a lifelong Republican, although he never voted for a Republican president. He always voted for Democrats. And he was a contemporary of, I don't know if you know who Mark Hatfield is, he was the governor. And Daddy was president of Young Republicans when Mark Hatfield was a young man, and Clay Myers, who became the Secretary of State. So these were people who, when you figure that they were from small, my mother was from a rural town, my dad was from a small kind of an oil town. These people came a long way. He owned his own barber shop when I was in 6th grade. They got a grocery store, mom, pop, and the kids, a grocery store. And I essentially ended my childhood. Now, up to that time, this was an idyllic childhood. It was like living in the South in a lot of ways because the black community in Portland was very small, and so you knew everybody. And you knew all the black folks that lived in Vancouver, and you knew all the black folks that lived further down into Oregon because that was just the way it was. You knew everybody because such a small community. And so your parents never worried about where you were. I mean, we might leave our bicycles out in the yard because nobody's going to steal it. They all knew it was our bike, and your dogs weren't tied up. They roamed around the neighborhood along with the kids, and kids were in and out of everybody's house. So it was fun. I mean, and it was just to show you how long ago it was when Portland had 4 seasons. So we actually had 4 seasons. We didn't have this overcast all the time. And it was just a wonderful time. We took tap dance and ballet lessons and baton lessons, and this was at Knott Street Community Center, and I took piano lessons, and it was just I was in the church choir and all the things that kids do that they love, and you had loving parents, and these were people who were lovers, and they would, kiss and hug. I never heard them argue. I remember as an adult asking my mom, did you guys ever argue? And she goes, well, not a whole lot of arguing, but we disagreed. But we agreed to disagree. We didn't have to fight and argue. And I think in some ways that has had an influence on me starting this Race Talks. So the work that my parents did, Daddy was in the NAACP, and he and she were he was active in it. I mean, they both belonged to everything together, but he was the one who was active in that. Mom had Campfire Girls and Bluebirds and ran vacation and ran Bible school at our house year-round. You know, when hobos came by, that's what they used to call homeless people, was hobos. And it was not, the stigma that's attached to homeless people was not the same then. Because from the Depression, there had been so many people who lived in Hoover towns that didn't have money. You're familiar with Hoover towns? Okay, so look that up. And people, there were all kind of people who were poor. So, you know, people would come up and knock on folks' door who had some money and would say, okay, can I get a meal? Can I sweep your sidewalk? Can I rake your leaves? What can I do? I just need a meal. And there wasn't this fear that was involved with different people like that. People just happened to be down on their luck. So, you know, I saw in my parents a generosity, a caring for the community. Mom was a precinct manager and, you know, did voter registration, Mother's March of Dimes, you know, picked a number, PTA president. I mean, when I look back on my life, it's like, this is storybook stuff. It's storybook stuff, but it was my life, and it was the start of my life. And so, grew up with a real strong sense of social justice and a strong sense of rooting for the underdog. When I was a kid, my favorite hero on TV, the only black person who was there consistently, was Mighty Mouse. And does that tell you what things were like? I mean, Mighty Mouse was the only black person I saw, and that was my hero. So, you know, I was going to grow up and be Mighty Mouse and change the world. And in fact, this last year, one of our posters had Mighty Mouse on it. So it was like, yes, we got to get Mighty Mouse in there. And he's flying over Portland with his little SJ social justice badge on and doing his thing. So, but I told you my childhood because so often, particularly white people, have this image of black people that is so not who we are. And it's an image that has been produced by white people and put into the media. And it's been done so well that there are so many black folks, young people, who think, well, I must not be black enough because I ain't got my pants hanging down here and I didn't grow up in the ghetto, as I like to call it. And, you know, my dad's, I know my dad, and, you know, I know my mom, and I've only had one mom and one dad, and so there must be something wrong with me. And it's an image that was created by this country. And it was a circumstance that was created by this country, because when I grew up as a child, you knew everybody, and they all had a mother and a father living in the house, and all the kids looked like the mother and father who were in that house. Whereas today, you find so many people who have 5 kids in the house, and the dad's not there because each one of those kids have a different dad. So social circumstances were set up in this country in the 60s when the Black Power movement came out. They did that. They broke up the black family. And that's when this thing started happening, and they started really targeting the black community for,
Sorry.
you okay?
Yes.
I hear you.
Apologies.
And they started targeting the black community to get rid of us. We were no longer placid and willing to just be walked on. We were wanting to be full citizens too. And so it's kind of like, oh, you saying it loud, you're black and you're proud, okay, we're going to show you what will be the consequences of that. And it has been a downhill slope ever since then. There are some of us who sneak through and manage to do okay, but as a group, it has been set up for the extermination of the African American community. And I decided to become a teacher. I had an experience when I was in first grade that really shaped me tremendously. My parents did spank us. In fact, the spankings that we got now would be considered child abuse. But then everybody got spanked like that then. And, you know, you got a switch or a toaster cord or a belt. It wasn't beatings, But it was spankings, and it was spankings that are much more violent than what they do now. Nowadays, you know, if you smack the kid's hand, somebody gonna turn you in for having smacked the kid's hand. But at that time, everybody, white, black, everybody got spankings. You just, you know, you had a certain way, there was a certain decorum that you had to follow as a person in a society. And now it's more individual and come see, come saw, and everybody does their own thing, you know, and the kids are running around doing what they want to do. A little bit different world than what I grew up in. But anyway, when I was in first grade and I was slightly loquacious, only slightly, it was time to line up. And I was a young first grader. I went to kindergarten when I was 4. And I ended up going to kindergarten when I was 4 because I had 3 older sisters and brothers. And when you're the younger child, they are always teaching you. Do you want to move, sweetheart?
Oh, yeah, I'm fine.
Okay. But they end up, they teach you, you know. So whatever they learn in school, it's like, what did you learn today? I want to learn it too. So, you know, why did I take piano lessons? Because my older sisters did and they didn't want to do it. I can't wait till I get old enough to take piano lessons. And so, you know, that was my thing. So whatever they were doing, I wanted to keep up with those big kids. So I went to kindergarten at 4 because I was always at the school hanging out in the kindergarten because my mother was a PTA president. And when she was going to go do stuff, then she just dropped me off in kindergarten, so I'd already done a year of kindergarten by the time kindergarten came for me, and so they forged my birth certificate and I got into kindergarten. And this says 1948. So I went into kindergarten, and so, you know, I was, like I said, I was slightly loquacious in first grade, and they had a new school, and they took, my girlfriend Shirley was not lining up, and the teacher had said, this is, God bless her soul, I'm not going to say the woman's name to protect the guilty because she became a state figure, political figure, and so I will protect her. But she had told us to be quiet, and she was not prepared for teaching all of these lower socioeconomic, mixed socioeconomic black kids. And so, you know, some of the kids were wild. This was the first time they'd been to school. They hadn't been to kindergarten or preschool. And I happened to do all of that stuff and have older sisters and brothers too. So Shirley wasn't getting in line, and I turned around and said, Shirley, you better hurry up and come get in line. And the teacher hauled off and slapped the bejesus out of me. And I went into shock because I had never been slapped before. Now, had she spanked my behind, that I would have understood. But she slapped me. My parents had never put their hands in my face. And they were smart enough to know that that causes brain damage. And so they wouldn't do that sort of thing. And so I was in hysterics all day long. And when I wasn't crying, outright crying, I was going, and she was saying, she wouldn't let me go to the office to call. So I couldn't wait till I got home. Oh, I'm going to tell my mom when I get home. And she's going to come up there and she's going to fix that teacher. So I go home and, hold on. And I got home, and of course, when I got to the corner, then I started screaming. I mean, and Mom comes running out of the house, what's going on? And she tells me, and see, I always like to say, God watches out for babies, fools, and his own. And I never know which one I am. So I don't question, but I know that there is a God, and God's watching out, because that particular day, Mom didn't have the car. And so she called Daddy and told him what had happened and said, okay, I want the car. I'm going up to the school. No, I'm not bringing the car home. And no, you will not leave the house. Now, if I had to get in a fight, who would I want on my side? I want the crazy lady. Because he's going to be calm and rational. Oh no, I want her. Do not, no. Nah. In fact, when I got married the second time, my second husband said, your mother is so cute. And I said, really, what did she say? He says, oh, she told me, she says, I don't believe in abuse, because if you do, I'll get you. And I said, she's not joking. She will comfort you. He's like, oh, yeah, she is not joking. So I suggest you treat me real good, you know. So, it was, so Mom went up to the school and she talked to the teacher and said, I understand that you slapped Donna in the face. She says, tell her I'm coming up to see her. Well, some of the parents had come up and jumped on the teachers before, and so the teacher did not know what to expect. So my mother came up and she spoke to her, called her out in the hall, and she said, I understand you slapped Donna, and I don't slap my children. And I don't suggest that you ever do it again. If you do, this time I'm coming to talk to you. Next time I will go to the school board and get your job. So I hope we understand each other perfectly clearly. Needless to say, she understood her very clearly. And that influenced my life a lot. That influenced, because I ended up becoming a teacher. I decided in 6th grade, after my parents got a grocery store, and I saw so many people coming in who were the age of my parents or old enough to be my grandparents who were just nasty to me sometimes. And I couldn't figure out what the problem was. And I was really tiny. When I graduated from 8th grade, I was not 5 feet tall. I was 4'10" when I graduated from 8th grade. And grew 4 inches that summer, so I mean, I became like giant girl all of a sudden. But I couldn't understand why these people couldn't read and write. And so my parents said they never got to go to school. They didn't have teachers that taught them. In the South, a lot of times when people were poor, and here in that age group, in the North too, if people were poor, they dropped out, the older kids dropped out of school to work to help take care of the younger kids. So here were people who were in their 50s and 60s and 70s and didn't know how to read, and here I was, this little midgeted kid who had to stand on a box in order to be seen over the counter when I was working in the store, and I was going to help them read. So I decided we go back to my hero. Who's my hero?
Mighty Mouse.
Mighty Mouse. I'm going to save the world. I want to teach all these people how to read. And my dad said, well, it would be hard to do that because people have to work. So couldn't do that. And I thought, well, I'll become a teacher. So that was my goal from 6th grade forward, was to become a teacher and save the world and help children know how to read and write and have the skills that they needed and have the kind of childhood that I had. So my 1st grade teacher was one of my role models. And she was a negative role model, but she shaped me to be the kind of teacher that I wanted to be, where I showed my kids love, where I showed them discipline, where I was fair. You know, and in fact, it was so funny with my teaching that some of the kids would go, well, you're her pet, and the other kids would go, you know she doesn't have pets. She doesn't have anybody she likes special. She's fair to everybody. And, you know, and to teach kids skills, to give them the skills and the understanding of life that I had. There was a curriculum that was taught, but, you know, by this time when I graduated from college at 21, I got married Friday night, had a reception Saturday night, drove from Portland to Chico Sunday and went to work Monday with my new name that the kids kept calling me, and I didn't know, I wasn't answering them. And the teacher who was in the room said, well, I told you to ask Ms. Pomerantz. And he said, I did ask her, but she didn't answer. So he finally goes, Donna? I go, yeah. He says, are you helping these kids do so? I told the kids to do so-and-so. Mrs. Pomerantz will help you. And I go, who? So I didn't know my name. I hadn't had it long enough, you know. And so I started teaching at a very young age, and that influenced me a lot. I was the first and only black teacher in Oroville, California, which is up in Northern California in Butte County. I like to call Butte County the armpit of the universe. And in fact, I don't know if you guys are familiar with Lee Manoir. He did a film called The Color of Fear. It was done back in the late 90s. You might want to check that out. But it was with some different, he did two black men, 2 Asian men, 2 white men, 2 Latino men, and he was the facilitator. And they did it in, which one's further in the more rural area, Ukiah or Eureka?
Oh, I think it might be Ukiah.
Yeah. And so they did it in Ukiah. And part of the film is them talking about how they had fear as men of color coming up there to Ukiah. And it was just it's a very interesting film, but, you know, they talk about the racism and the problems that happen and being in, and Lee Manoir did another film recently, and it had been with students that were at Chico State, and one of the students who was in the film ended up coming up missing after they had this reunion, and he had a white girlfriend and found out he was found in the trunk of his car, that the car had been driven off the side of the road and had been burned, and he was in the trunk. So this was just within the last 3-4 years. So Butte County was quite interesting. I married that white guy, my first husband.
I'm sorry. What is a husband?
A husband, he was my husband,
Oh, thank you.
my husband. And he,
My mom says that too.
and we, you know, I was 21, he was 23, he was in grad school in psych at Chico State. And it was my first experience living in rural America. We went to Pacific, but, you know, that wasn't that far away. What I did know at the time, the Pacific had, over in Banks, Oregon, they had the largest Ku Klux Klan branch west of the Mississippi at the time we were going to school at Pacific. So it was all very new and different. And the movie of the summer was Easy Rider. You guys have to get that movie and check it out. But one of the things in the movie was the protagonist, or the antagonists, were driving a pickup truck and had a gun in the back of the truck and killed some people. And when I pulled into Chico, guess what everybody's driving and guess what's in their back window? I was terrified. You know, and I think back on it now and I'm thinking, what the hell were you thinking, marrying a white boy, going to Northern California? I just didn't know. My parents had brought us up, and his parents too, that everybody's equal, everybody's the same. And you find someone that you can hook up with and meet up with, and that's who you marry. So we were married for 7.5 years and had our beautiful daughter, who is now finishing up law school at Southern University. And it was very interesting being there. I was the first and only black teacher in Oroville. I was one of, I think at the time, yeah, I was one of 3 black teachers in the county when I started. And when I left, there were 7. I never did meet the other 6. So it was a very segregated place. And there were quite a few black people there in the county. It was the largest black population north of Sacramento until you get to the Oregon border. And if you know Oregon, you know that there aren't any other black people until you get to Eugene, really. So there are a few in Klamath Falls, but not a lot. So it was an interesting experience, and here we were, this little integrated couple, a black woman, a white Jew, who was a conscientious objector at the height of the Vietnam War, living in John Birch country, and John Birch is like a half a step below the Klan. So living in John Birch country, driving a gold Volvo station wagon. We lived in Chico and I drove to Oroville, driving a gold Volvo station wagon at a time when you had to send to Sweden for parts. So everybody knew who we were in the county. You know, we step outside, they knew who all of us were. And I think me being the school teacher is somewhat of what saved us from being harassed, and the fact that he was white and I was black. The female was black, as opposed to a black male with a white female. I think that our circumstances would have been very different. There was only one other couple that I knew of that was highly integrated in that manner, and that was a black male and a white female, but they were older, and he was a doctor. So that made him a little bit different than run-of-the-mill Joe Blow brother with a white woman. So it was all very interesting, and you know, when I have talked to people about my marriage and stuff and mentioned who we were and what we did and all those things, you know, it's not until at some point when I talk about the divorce, I mention that white, so on, so, and they go, oh, I didn't know he was white. And it's like, well, they're kind of all the same. They are kind of all the same. I hate to tell you that, guys, but you guys are just kind of all alike. I like you, but you guys are kind of, I mean, the next guy I married was a black guy, and they're kind of alike. So, you know, it's not as mysterious as it seems. There aren't that many variations on the human form. So, so anyway, I went along and I did all these things. I did other kinds of jobs after he and I divorced when our baby was a year and a half. I decided to get out of teaching because you couldn't do 24 hours a day teaching. Did all these different other jobs. I sold copiers. I worked at Nordstrom's for a while. I worked in this legislature. I did some teaching at adult schools. I worked in the California Office of Economic Opportunity as a trainer and a manager, and just did all these different things because I didn't know what I wanted to do. I mean, all I'd ever wanted to be was a teacher, and I needed to support my baby. And I got a real education working in that California state government, especially the legislature, in the governor's office and in the legislature. And it was at a time when sexual politics were a little bit different than they are now. I mean, it was like whistles were all over the place. Walking by people, pats on the butt were no unusual thing. You know, being compromised by your boss or anybody else was nothing new. So when I applied for the legislature, my line was, I have a child to support and I will do anything as long as it's legal, moral, and ethical. So that kind of set the stage for who I was and kept a whole bunch of crazy people away from me. That's that crazy one. She's about the legal, moral, and ethical thing. So that's kind of how I've conducted my life. And I'm sharing some of the experiences and some of the history along the way because I was always in the spotlight. As a child, my dad was one of the few blacks who owned his own business. And then when I became a teacher in Northern California, being the only black teacher and people watching everything you do, some of our friends told us, and I know you guys can't even identify with this thing, but you know, when you're having a party, be careful. If you have a lot of wine or something like that, don't put all your bottles into the garbage at once because the garbage man is checking out your garbage, and word will get all over town that you're drunk. You know, don't smoke dope. If you do, make sure you don't open your windows, and you know, I mean, just all different kinds of things than life is now. And so I grew up with this thing, with this feeling of responsibility to my people that came from my parents, which came from their parents. I don't know if you've seen the movie The Great Debaters with Denzel Washington. Yes, Forrest Whitaker was in it. And Denzel was a union worker. Well, my dad's father was a union worker, and he died trying to, he was secretly one of the first union workers, and he died in a dispute between two workers trying to break up a fight that they had, and he got shot and died. So there's a long line of responsibility to the public, to making life better, of being a social justice person. And so I got out of teaching, and then after my daughter got older, I went back into teaching. And then I was at, I left California and came back to Oregon in '85 and got married, moved back to California, then came back up to Oregon and worked in West Linn for a year. That was an experience. Teaching my little babies out there. That's where the Martin Luther King statue came in. We raised over $500 in my third grade classroom, a quarter at a time. We wrote a school newspaper and sold it. And I had all these little white kids out there working for Martin Luther King Jr. Mm-hmm. So you can imagine that was quite interesting. Now the parents were very supportive. There were only one or two who were not. The administration didn't like me quite so much. But the parents liked me a lot, and the kids liked me a lot. And in fact, one of my students invited me to his graduation from high school party and sent me an invitation when he got his bachelor's degree and was letting me know about his master's, you know, and I ran into one of my former students last year, and she's 26, and I mean, so they've kind of stayed in touch, and I think the teaching that I did had a profound effect on them because they learned about other cultures. They learned about Black people. They learned up close and personal about Jews and Asians and all different cultures. And I think it's important as a teacher, as a person, to share those things with kids and with other adults. So in a long way around, I'm coming up to race talks and kind of how it was easy for me to do race talks. We had read the book, Important Public Schools, called Courageous Conversations About Race. And I don't know if any of you have read that, but that's one you should get. And I saw that with the techniques used in that book, that people who had never talked about race before and who were clearly racist were able to do it and get it. I'm like, wow, this is powerful stuff. So now what we have to do is we need to have this in the public where it's away from your paycheck. Because if I'm doing a paycheck and you want me to say certain things, then I'm probably going to say what you want me to say. But that doesn't necessarily change who I am. And you know, it's real easy when you are younger and all you have is yourself to say, I wouldn't do that. But when you have bills to pay, house payments, children to take care of, it's amazing how you will compromise some of your values in order to survive, to take care of your children, and to take care of your obligations. I've seen so many times that women who have certain moral character, I'll give you an example of Suzanne, was it Suzanne Summers? She was on...
All in the Family?
No, it wasn't All in the Family, it was the one with John...
Three's Company.
Three's Company, yeah, Three's Company. And she was divorced and had a son, and she didn't have a job, and she needed to feed her child. So she went and took some nude photos because she needed food for her baby. You know, and a mother will do those sorts of things, and a father sometimes too, to take care of their children and their obligations. So after reading Courageous Conversations on Race, I thought, we need to have this in the community, and McMinimans asked me to be a speaker at one of their Black History Month events. And I said, okay, the name of the event was Urban Renewal, Urban Removal. And I was supposed to give the heart and soul story of what it was like living in, being removed from our home. We lived down under the hill in Portland. We lived on Borthwick. And I say under the hill because they had big hills, and this was a perfect place for people to come when it snowed, because there were all these steep hills that came down, and you know, they'd close the streets off and then everybody come and sled down there. And so the whole Albina area down under that hill got wiped out by the Memorial Coliseum and by Emmanuel Hospital. And if you go up Williams Avenue on Williams and Russell, there is an empty lot on your left side on the northwest corner that has been empty for over 50 years. Actually, let me get that number right, because I was 11, 12 when the businesses, it was full of businesses. And a lot of them were Black-owned businesses, and they raised all those buildings. And it's been a vacant lot ever since. Emmanuel was figuring that they were going to get this huge federal grant. And so they took all these people's houses from public domain. One of the things that they said was public domain was, and the way they were able to do this is if they said, if your ceilings are more than 8 feet high, and if you have a closet bathtub, then that's an old home that's dilapidated and needs to be torn down. So all of the older homes in town had that. you notice these ceilings are more than 8 feet. Well, but this is another zip code, so different story. And so they got rid of all these homes. We lost our church. We lost my dad had a barbershop. He lost his business. We lost our home. We lost our community. There were some people that I didn't see for over 50 years that lived around the corner from us. We never saw each other again. So there's some people I've still never seen from that community. And this was a very close, tight-knit community. So these are the kinds of things that happened that shaped who I am and how I felt about things. And I decided that I was going to start race talks after, well, people were calling Tim Hills, who was the historian for McMenamin's Kennedy School, and they wanted to know, you know, they were saying they were moved and inspired by the things I had to say at that speech. And I thought, gee, Toastmasters paid off. So I'd done good. And it was very interesting the way I told the story, because I thought, if I tell people my story growing up, what my family life was like, this doesn't fit their image of what black people's lives are like. So I'm not going to say that. I'm going to talk about the house that I grew up in, and if I describe the house, they're not going to believe that either. So I think I'll talk about the flora and fauna that were in the yard. And so I did that, and you know, everybody, a laurel bush is a laurel bush. You know, a Japanese maple is a Japanese maple. So I knew they would understand what was in that yard and what it looked like and what went into making that a home. And people were just horrified that they would tear down a house like this and say, this is you know, a ravished home. So when I kept hearing from Tim that people were moved and inspired, I said, well, what are you going to do about that? He goes, I don't know, I haven't thought about it. I said, well, I have. So here's what I'd like for us to do. And I'll come back to you with a proposal. So I had to think about how we were going to do it. And I wanted it to be a win-win situation. McMenamin's is a business, and so what they are most concerned about is green. And so I needed to come up with something that would give them income. But I needed these discussions about race. And I knew that I could bring people, because I know a lot of people, and I knew that I could bring the program, because one of the jobs that I had been a trainer, and doing training for all kinds of people when I was in California. So what I needed was someone to help make these discussions safe, and I came across Uniting to Understand Racism, and Harold was in that group. And I basically attacked Uniting to Understand Racism. I knew the guy who helped start it, and said, okay, I want you guys to come and help make this, and from this you can get people who will lead, that you can have for your dialogue groups, excuse me. One of the hazards of being a teacher is that you work in old buildings. And I got environmental poisoning in my classroom. And so nobody ever tells you that, but you have health hazards being a teacher. So anyway, that's how we started. And we worked on it for about 6 months or a year, and started with our first program. And that was Uniting to Understand Racism had a program that they wrote, a curriculum that they wrote for the schools for 8th graders called Beyond the Oregon Trail. And it was about people who came to Oregon that were not white. Because if you look in the textbooks, all you know about is the white folks. And so it's a whole 6 or 8 week curriculum that talks about other kinds of people who came here and individuals who came. So that was our first one. And then that first year we talked about, these are people of color, 101. You know, we started with African Americans, because I thought my people should be first. We're the first people on the map anyway. You know, everybody came from Africa, so we'll start with that. And then we had the Latino experience in Oregon, the Asian experience in Oregon. I think the Asian experience in Oregon was one of my favorites. We had Filipinos, Hmong, Vietnamese, Eastern Indian, Thai, I mean, like, it was 7 different nationalities. And my favorite was Polo Catalani, who is an attorney and works for the city of Portland. Polo said, I didn't know I was an Asian until I came to the United States. When I lived in the Philippines, I was Filipino. And this person was Vietnamese, and this person was Thai, and, you know, and all, you know, but when they came to the United States, everybody got lumped together. People who have nothing in common other than their people, and they happen to not be Arab or African or white. So they're lumped into a group. And so every year we have a different theme. This year our theme is films about people of color by and about people of color. And if you look at your brochure on the back, we have the ground rules that we use at these talks. And I think that these ground rules are very important. In the last year, we started a series of community police forums. And the police came to Race Talks and they were stunned because they said to me afterwards, it was exactly like you said it was going to be. I said, yeah, what did you expect? Well, nobody was hollering at us, and nobody was calling us names. I go, no, we're not doing that. I'm a 3rd grade teacher. That means we're going to have warm cookies, cold milk, and everybody's going to play nice. And if they don't, I'm going to get in their jammies. So that's kind of how we run. We work it. And I'd like to go over the ground rules with you and just kind of explain them. So to listen to each other with curiosity, that is so important. Everybody has a story, and each one of you, I mean, most of you came from California, but, you know, I've lived in Berkeley. I lived in Oakland. I lived in Butte County. I mean, I've been to the places all of you are from. And so, I mean, this is not that unusual to have, you know, people who have been the same place, but you don't really know other people's story. You really don't know what they're about, what they're like. Respect differences. And this is the one that I think is the most important one. Agree to disagree. So many people want to argue with a person to try and convince them that this is how they should think. And what we encourage people to do at Race Talks is just listen to what the other person has to say. Don't argue with them. Let them have their point of view. They're more likely to accept what you have to say if you respect their point of view than if you try to tell them their point of view is wrong. Speak from the self and from the heart. One of the things that I do is I know a lot of people, and so I'm always talking about, well, I know somebody who. I'm not calling their name because I'm respecting their confidentiality, which is the one down below, but I do know a story. So what I will say is I know somebody who, but that's not my story. That's not Donna. That's not the life that I lived. And so I try to, you know, speak from your own experience. The confidentiality part is you have the right, since you're in a discussion, to share what other people have said. But you don't have a right to say that Joe Jones, who lives on 12th Avenue, said, and he works at, you know, Banfield Pet Hospital on 82nd, and he said, but you don't have a right to do that. You can share what was said, but you cannot share who and those particulars. And a lot of times when people share things in an open group, they're sharing in the moment and not sharing from the standpoint of, they might not have said it had you not been there. There might be something about you that has moved that person to feel a trust level that they can share those things. Contribute honestly and positively. Assume positive intent. This is the one that most white people are really frightened of talking about race. Well, I don't want people to think I'm a racist. Well, I like to tell white folks, you're only a racist if you're white, then you're taking advantage of a white system. You're only and if you are fighting the system, then you are anti-racist. If you are profiting from the system but not trying to change it, then you're a passive racist. You're not actively changing what's happening that is holding other people down. And I was talking with an Asian woman today, and we were saying, you don't never see any black folks out bungee jumping. And the question is, why? Can't they afford it? Yes, we have the money to go bungee jumping, but we don't need the thrills. We have enough of a thrill trying to get out the door and make it back home without getting shot by the police or you know, picked on in a store or followed or any of the hassles that you get for being a person of color. So we don't have to go out and look for those kinds of thrills. White people's lives are much more even keeled. And yes, you do have pressures, you do have things that happen to you at work, but people of color have those things too, in addition to being a person of color. So, you know, I'm not saying that there aren't black people who bungee jump, but you just don't see a lot of pictures of black folks out there bungee jumping. It's enough of a thrill. Be open to new ideas. Oh, and what we tell people about the positive intent. You will stick your foot in your mouth. Everybody does. There's no such thing as having a conversation and not offending somebody at some time. But assume that the person is meaning to be positive. And I always say my job as a facilitator is to help you take your foot out of your mouth and to keep other people from putting their foot somewhere else on you, now that you said what you had to say. So be open to new ideas. A white friend of mine told me I needed to put this one in there. I said, you may experience discomfort. He said, not may. White folks don't like to talk about race. They're real uncomfortable with it. So I said, okay, you may experience discomfort. So because my last one was relax and enjoy, he said, we're not going to enjoy talking about race. That's upsetting. So my last thing I wanted to share with you was a poster. And this is from last night. We had a race talks at very nice professional poster. I didn't do it. So it was done by Portland Public Schools, which is one of our sponsors too. And I guess if I had to summarize my life is coming from these people. My mother, my father, and my ancestors, the people whose shoulders I stand on, and understanding that I have a responsibility to be the shoulders that the next generation stands on. Mm-hmm. So I think I answered most of your questions. Any that I didn't answer? Yes, ma'am.
Maybe this was said, but how often do you guys, it's like race talks?
Monthly at McMenamins Kennedy School. We meet the second Tuesday of the month from 7 to 9. Recommend that you come. Doors open at 6. Recommend you come early. You can buy beer and wine. This is where McMenamins comes in with their part that they get. You can buy beer and wine or sodas, whatever.
And food, right?
Any kind of food you want. And then come, and it's free, and all ages. We've had people from newborns to people in their 90s.
Yeah, so you mentioned the curriculum. Is that actually brought to Portland Public Schools, or is that the curriculum you bring with McMenamins for?
The curriculum is curriculum that I write, and it's how it, well, you've been, so tell them what it's like.
So you walk into the gym and there's a bunch of tables, and then depending on what the subject is, there's like 3 or 4 speakers that have expertise in that. So maybe it's about education, there's a teacher and a principal and something like that, and they talk about the subject. And then you break into tables, and if everybody at the table looks just like you, then you're encouraged to get up and make sure that there's a mix at your table, and you discuss it. But in ways that are really, like I remember at my table, there were 7 or 8 of us, and I thought a lot of us looked quite a bit the same, and then when we got introduced, we found out that no, actually they're Native American, and they're, you know, so things that you don't usually introduce yourself and say, hello, this is my ethnic background or whatever. And then you just talk about the subject, but I think that you're right, a lot of times there's just kind of a lot of pussyfooting around issues that really aren't interesting, and that's not what happens at Race Talks. At Race Talks, you talk about interesting things with a sort of race paradigm.
Agreed.
I understand that better. I thought that you were talking about, I'm better, I'm backwards in that.
How many people normally come?
We have 150 seats. We usually have 150 plus people. This last one, we had over 200 people. It was a film, and so folks stood in the back and watched the film. And so we usually have the activity the first hour, and then the second hour we have the small group discussions. And some events, half the audience might leave after the panel or the film, and other events, everybody stays. I mean, nobody leaves, and we've had events where I knew we were over the legal limit when I was up at the podium welcoming the audience, and I looked down and somebody was sitting on the floor next to me. I thought, oh, we are a little over the limit. Hope the fire marshal does not come. So usually we have a sellout crowd. I should be charging people. But right now, I don't get a salary. It's my goal to get a salary because I need one, and I put in a lot of hours on this. And it's not that I don't think I'm worth a salary, it's that this little old lady is in year 20 of a stroke. And so she was a wonderful mother, and we take care of her because she was wonderful.
And I have just a personal question about your husband. He was a Jew.
Which one?
Your first one, your first one.
Okay.
He was a white Jewish man, and just out of curiosity, me being Jewish, my grandfather had a lot of run-ins in Denver with the KKK himself, and I mean, was he at all affected? I mean, you say that the whiteness kind of kept you guys from being attacked personally, but did he have personal attacks from being Jewish?
Not physical,
Yeah.
but emotional. Yeah, I mean, I don't know if you know much about Chico, California. I don't even know how to describe that whole area, Chico, Oroville, rural, and Chico's a party school. The only thing there that makes Chico different than the rest of the surrounding country is the college. And, people would make cracks about his nigger wife, or, about him being a Jew or something like that. I mean, it was much more blatant then than it is now. But yeah, I mean, you develop a tough skin to it, and you tell people, very nicely where to get off, but you don't, if there's one thing I developed from my life was learning that I always think of that secret commercial, never let them see you sweat. So, you never let them know how much they've gotten under your skin. Because if you show fear, then they will never let up. And they will be relentless. You don't have to show bravado, but you don't want to show fear. So, there were things that were said.
Do you think that moving forward in places like Chico or very segregated areas that are largely racist, white, places, do you think that there's any hope in terms of creating race talks in those types of situations, or is it that this mindset, because you were saying there have been people who've come to the race talks and really shifted their outlooks and seen things that they had never expected to see and really changed. And I just hope that that's possible, but when knowing how screwed up people are, I guess that's a big judgment, but it is, it's not okay, and I don't know if people are able to shift their perspectives in these concentrated pockets.
Well, it's hard to be in a segregated environment and talk about race. Just like it's impossible for men to conduct a natural childbirth conference. I mean, they might be advocates, hold your hand, love you, be right there, catch the baby, all of that stuff. They are not going through the experience. So, you know, it's impossible to have a discussion about race without a person of color in that discussion. And yes, it is possible, but the purpose of race talks is for people to talk about race. And in talking about race, get to talk to someone and understand that their life is not that different from yours. What they want is not that different from you. I mean, I was just looking at an article in one of the older Oprah magazines about Abraham Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And where it starts, you know, the first one, do you guys know about the hierarchy of needs? Okay. So you know where you are, and I looked at it and I thought, I'll be doggone, I've been working for self-actualization all these years, and I really got the transcendence. How about this? I got race talks. I'm in the transcendence. I'm at the top. So I was really quite thrilled with that one. But it's about getting to talk to people. How did I end up marrying that white guy? Because we both worked in the library, we became friends, we started talking, we found out we had things in, you know, in common. You know, people are people. You know, we had similar things we did in childhood. I mean, it was very funny. We at Pacific had to take religion, so. And it was interesting because I knew the Old Testament better than he did, got better grades in the Old Testament, and he got better grades than I did in New Testament. And I mean, you know, people are just people. And when you turn the lights out, you don't see the color. And about every 6 months when we were married, I'd roll over and look at him and go, oh my God, you're white. And he'd go, well, what'd you think I was? I said, well, I know you're white, but you're white. And it would just blow my mind that I had married a white guy. Like, what did you do? And I knew he loved me, but I would have to kind of talk myself down off the ledge. That, you know, all the implications that went with being with a white male. And if one thing has been taught to me from all the different jobs I've had, and I think Nordstrom's pointed this out to me more than anything, is that all of the isms in the world, racism, sexism, ableism, classism, all those isms are really filters to eliminate competition for goods and services. It's not personal. When I realized that Donna Maxey's name was not written on any of that stuff, it just took this burden off of me. It isn't about me. It's about whoever has the whatever the qualities are that this person is trying to get rid of, they're going to put that on that person. And it's not about you. And I mean, and, you know, as I like to tell young people, you are very important. And, you know, I think I'm extremely important, but mostly just to myself. And that's the bottom line. You came here alone, you're going to leave alone. And, you know, if you can touch some people in between, wonderful. But we're all just in here trying to struggle and figure it out for ourselves. And the people who are stepping on other people's self-esteem to build their own, the bottom line is that they're not being all that they could be either. So.
Question about the ground rules. I think two things I've struggled with, like in my life of talking and disagreeing. Like I think I've done a very good job of changing to start to assume positive intent more. Like I didn't really do that for a lot of my life, but I'm still really struggling with agreeing to disagree. Like when I think someone's wrong morally, logically, for whatever reason, I feel an obligation to correct that wrong, especially if it's a wrong that I think is hurting me in particular, or if it's hurting people that I care about. So I'm asking for more on that. You talked about a little bit more on why it's so important to agree to disagree. Why is it not enough to disagree?
I think most people want to be loved and accepted. And one of the problems I think white people are having with talking about race is that they don't want to hear that the people who are in their family tree that they love and respect, and old Pow Pow was a downright awful person. And so you have to allow people their own myths, their own stories, and not make them wrong in the process of making yourself right. And so, give me an example of something that you think that someone would do that would offend you and how you would handle it.
Sure. Yeah, I come from a very liberal family, obviously Berkeley, California. But my brother has lived in Laurinburg, North Carolina, which is a very small, very segregated town, and has kind of become incredibly outwardly racist and outwardly like essentially a Trump supporter in a lot of ways. And so it's so hard for me to communicate with him because I want him to change to my side, to change back to my side, I guess. But I can't get him to listen to me. So when he says we have to ban all Muslims, and I need to I've tried to say no, we don't because of these reasons, or no, we don't need more screenings because we already are doing it.
So ask him why. Why do you have to ban all Muslims? And what will that accomplish? And, find out his point of view. As a person who is slightly loquacious, as I said, I do understand the need to try and convince people of your point of view. Sometimes it's, I just thought of the Muhammad Ali thing, fly like a butterfly, sting like a bee, that sometimes it might be better to just tread lightly and just get a little zinger in there and then go away and let the effect happen. And instead of telling him what he shouldn't do, tell him what you think is positive and why and maybe even say, I can understand why you would have that. And one of the things that I went to the church Science of Mind, which was in Oakland, here in Alameda.
For what that's become.
Yeah. And so one of the things that was very profound for me was that they said that there are two basic emotions, love and fear. And all the rest of the emotions come from those. So when someone is espousing something that's ugly, recognize that it comes from a place of fear, and then go backwards and figure out what are they fearful of? What are they afraid is going to happen that is going to keep them from moving up Maslow's hierarchy of needs? So, and just so you know, Berkeley's not as liberal as you think. Because I ran a program at Malcolm X Middle School. And one of the things that I found very interesting when I was running this program was that Berkeley was the first city in the country to voluntarily integrate. But what they did is all of the K-3 students went to the schools in the hills. All of the 4-5 students went to the flatland schools where the black folks were. And then there were 2 junior highs and 1 high school. Well, what's interesting is that Berkeley has more private schools than any other town per capita around. And what happened was that they would let their kids go to the K-3 school, but then for the
4 for 12.
the 4 through 8 a lot of times, but definitely 4-5, they sent them to private schools.
It still happens.
Yeah.
That happened.
Happened to you, huh? Yeah. So it's there's liberal and there's liberal, and I think in Berkeley people are liberal. I think a lot of times people are liberal in terms of their voting. I think they're liberal in terms of their talk, but it's another thing to do it in terms of your walk.
Yes.
And so, You have to learn to, what were you saying, sweetheart?
She's in Portland.
I just feel that way about Portland every day.
Yeah.
When I go back to Denver, it's like, oh, sweet relief to be
Yeah.
around people of diversity again and to be around.
Yeah, so there's a lot of people who say, oh, you know, some of my best friends, really? I always ask people, how many of you know your neighbors? You know, and think about this, I'm gonna ask you, do you know your neighbors? Do you know 3 houses across from you, 3 houses to the left, 3 houses to the right? By know them, do you have their phone number? Have you been in their house? Have they been in your house? Do you entertain with each other? Do you have, if you're a white person, do you have people of color? And if you're a person of color, do you have white people or people of other ethnicities who are on your speed dial? You know, the people you call up and go, hey, I got a promotion, let's go have a drink. Me and the boyfriend broke up, I need to talk, it's 3 o'clock in the morning. You know, do you have people who are truly your friends that are different ethnicities? And that's the real thing, is if you have those people who are on your speed dial, then that means you look at people as people. But most people don't, and it's because they're trying to eliminate competition for goods and services. So it ain't even personal. It's just, we gotta eliminate some folks, and so we can just eliminate a whole group of people real fast.
Well, we have gone beyond 7:30 by a few minutes, so I want to acknowledge if folks need to step out, you're welcome to. And if you'd like to continue, or if you want to ask other questions, please feel free to do that as well. Thanks for coming, everyone. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And don't feel obligated to stay and talk to me.
But I do really recommend going to Race Talks. I think it's a really unique format.
You know, Ginger, you should find that article you wrote about it and share with Harold, so you can share it with the folks that are in this group. Because Ginger was in a group, and I thought, and I read this article she wrote for the Pacific, what it was, the Alumni Magazine or something like that.
You know what, I totally forgot about that, gosh.
I'll send it to Harold. I'll send it to Harold. But anyway, it was amazing. And I thought, wow, is that what people discuss in the groups? You know, they were discussing all kinds of stuff that had nothing to do with the, you know, the speaker. But it was fascinating. It was really fascinating. So I'll send the article to Harold.
So it takes place at this 33rd Avenue.
Mm-hmm. So it's really easy.
Transportation.
Yeah.
Students wanted to-
Yeah, we talked about like running that SLS shuttle. We have a college outdoors vehicle that seats 8,
That's
so
awesome.
maybe like taking a group up.
Okay.
I've seen other schools do that as
Yeah,
well. So.
yeah, there are a lot of classes that meet there from Portland State, Lewis and Clark, different colleges, they come and meet. The students get credit. My favorite one was this kid who came from Corvallis. And remember when we had that storm about 1.5 years ago where trees were blown off the roads and all that stuff? This kid came from Corvallis that night, and I thought, he was so excited to be there. I'm going to get extra credit for doing this. And I said, yeah, but are you going to get back? Oh my God, why did you come? I need this. It's like, okay, only a college student would do this. Like, oh man. You intrigue me.
Why?
Because I can't read you.
It's the hat.
No, it's not the hat. It's not the hat.
What am I doing?
You're inside.
I'm gonna send
Oh yeah, I just want to give folks. She told me to share information with y'all. So.
No, no, that's fine.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh yeah, please. Thank you.
It's been interesting here for you.
Yeah.
Continuing saga, so.
Well, that, if you with the taking over the businesses.
You know public domain?
Yeah, and it's, I didn't realize that, because I go to Immaculate Park, which is right on.
Oh, yeah.
Northwood, so I
Yeah.
asked that.
Well, you know, the park, over in the park, the, what do you call it, the gazebo?
Yeah.
That used to be on Williams and Russell, on drugstore. That was up on the top of the drugstore.
Really?
Yeah,
Yeah.
there were all kinds of businesses, just
Oh, that's yours.
lots of small businesses that were in there. Shoe shops, and my favorite, a couple of hardware stores, the Weavers, record shop, and drugstores, and where the Urban League is, it was Citizens Fountain. It was, restaurant and fountain, and just all kinds of businesses in there, some honky tonks and hangouts and everything. So that's where, when I was a kid, that corner of Williams and Russell was the hub of life, and it was such a small community. If we were up there standing on the corner looking around at everybody doing everything, by the time we get to either the barber shop, the horn's like, what were you doing up on such and such a street? Don't lie. What were you doing? How do you know? And this was before cell phones and all this stuff. The word got home before you did. And if you were standing out there, it'd be like, Little Maxey. Now you'd be talking to a pimp, right? Little Maxey, yes sir. Are you supposed to be standing on this corner? Do your parents know you're here? You better go on home. You better hurry up and get home. So I mean, it was the community raised you, that's for sure.
And when was the neighborhood destroyed? When was the neighborhood,
Decimated.
decimated?
I would have been 11 or 12. So what was that? Early 60s, 60, 61. So it was a time they were doing that in a lot of cities.
Yeah.
So
They did that in Denver too. They did it in Denver too.
they've done it in every big town, and especially now this new gentrification thing. As I like to say, these people are not the gentry. The gentry are wealthy landowners. These people have a loan I can't get, which is a different thing. So, thank you much.
Thank you.